Okay, so I have the tongue in. I think it looks a little dark and a little heavy, but I am going to just continue with the next few washes of the rest of the dog. And sometimes what looks heavy on a white piece of paper looks correct later. Or not, so this is something that I could always lighten a little bit later, and the way I would do that is just put a bunch of water over the whole thing and just lightly lift out a little bit with a soft brush. It wouldn't take a lot. So, you know, they say watercolor is hard to fix. Well, maybe a little bit. You can't paint over it like you can in oil or acrylic, but there are lots of things you can do to fix mistakes. And one of your best friends when fixing mistakes is lots of water and a brush. And sometimes it's a hard brush if you really want to scrub it off, or a soft brush when you just want to lighten it a little. This is a piece that I've torn off one of those miracle scrubber sponges that you can buy in your grocery store cleaning aisle. I think they're called magic erasers, and you can use those to really scrub too, and it won't do much damage to your paper if you don't scrub too hard. Of course, I mean, if you scrub too hard with anything, it's gonna damage the paper underneath, but these really are great. And they don't have any chemicals in them. It's just they kind of work like an eraser, and you'll see that when you use them, they start this will start crumbling off as you use it, and eventually you'll have to replace it. So now what I want to do, usually my first layer, of course, is going to be really soft, and I'm just trying to get the undertones. So I wet the whole thing, and now I can even go over the eyes with this dog because his eyes are really dark brown. So I'm gonna wet just the whole thing. I don't have to avoid the eyes like I would like with a Siamese cat with light blue eyes. And also I put down my frisket in the eyes to catch that white spot, so I don't need to avoid that area either. I am going to avoid the tongue because I want to keep that nice clean pink color. Okay, now I'm going to go in and just take some burnt sienna in here and start putting in some color, and I'll go frequently to my palette and just change slightly the color, because if you use just one color, like I've said before, it's not going to look right. It's not going to look realistic. Here I'm going into some clean water. I'm going to lift this out. This is getting too wet, so this is a totally dry brush. Just lifting out some of that. And then I'm going to go back in with my ultramarine and burnt sienna on the brush at this point, just to go back where there's more cool colors. Then in the ear, oh, this is too dry, so I'm going to go back in and add more water, because I do want to keep this soft at this stage still. Okay, I just added a little bit of water, wrung out my brush like that, and just moisten this because I don't want these colors to spread too far here, because it's kind of a specific area. And you want to keep this soft. This is just the inner part of his ear. This is almost dry, but it's just wet enough that it keeps a soft edge right there. And that's kind of exactly what I want. Not quite a hard edge, but not completely going everywhere either. And you can add water, which I'm going to do. Adding some clean water to this edge because I don't want it that hard. You just have to play around with your brush and your watercolors and get a feel for how the paint reacts and kind of adjust accordingly. I'm looking at this and there's starting to be little splotches. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's splotches. Let me see if I can zoom in for you so you can kind of see what this looks like. Do you see how that's splotchy? I'm kind of worried about that because that means the sizing in the paper is not good and I might have to completely start over. So I'm going to let that dry and just see how it looks. If you notice this in your paper, you might want to look at the brand. If it's really bad, you might want to even get a refund because paper shouldn't do that. And I'm pretty sure this is Arches cold pressed, which is a pretty good quality paper, and it normally wouldn't do that. Although when I used to get those big huge rolls that you can get, they're yards and yards long. And I stopped buying those because the sizing was bad and so much of it that I had to throw so much of it away, it wasn't even worth it. So, and that's kind of looking like this is doing the same thing. So I don't know if I'm going to keep this. But this is a good lesson to learn. If you notice your paper doing this, it's because your paper is not good. And you need to start over, possibly, unless you're just playing around. I mean, you can still kind of play around on this, but this is going to be a commission, and it has to be right. So I'm going to let this dry at this point and just see what it looks like when it dries before I go any further.